Ever feel like life's on repeat? Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. Roy knew the feeling all too well. At 47, a commercial roofer for 17 years, his days were a brutal cycle of tar, sun, and aching muscles. He was living in a rented room in a coworker's bungalow. 5,500 a month straight to bills, 33,000 in debt, divorced, trying to rebuild with kids who barely remembered the man he used to be. Chloe, 22, and Ben, 20. Weekend calls filled with awkward silences. Roy wasn't unhappy, not exactly. More like numb, going through the motions. He remembered being 30, a graphic designer laid off from the local paper. They said his creativity wasn't needed. 17 years. 17 years since he'd picked up a pencil or a camera. That rejection had felt like a life sentence. Now the weight of the shingles felt lighter than the weight of regret. He bought a fishing rod. Went twice. It felt like wearing someone else's clothes. Fantasy football with the crew was just noise. The breaking point came on an old church roof. 100 years of history under his boots. Tearing it off, he found a tin box hidden in the attic. Old photographs. Faces from another time caught in perfect light. A family laughing. A baby's tiny hand. Someone had cared. Someone had wanted to remember. Roy looked at his own hands, calloused and scarred, and felt a sudden, sharp ache. What would he leave behind? That night he dug through his storage box. He found it under old tax returns and forgotten tools, his 35mm film camera, a Minolta, cold steel. He hadn't touched it in decades. He held it, the weight familiar, real, more real than anything had felt in years. He thought about those old photos, about the lives they captured, about the life he hadn't. A spark ignited. He wouldn't let the artist die. Not today. He wouldn't accept that it was too late. It was time for a renaissance. He walked outside, the camera heavy in his hand. He looked at the streetlight casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalk. He raised the camera to his eye. Click. It felt like breathing again, like waking up. Roy, 47 years old. 17 of them spent hauling shingles up ladders, baking under a relentless sun. He was a commercial roofer. It wasn't glamorous. It paid the bills, most of them anyway. His body felt every one of those years when he woke at 4:30 a.m., the aches of familiar greeting. He swallowed lukewarm coffee in the dim light of his rented room, the silence broken only by the rumble of the refrigerator. His room was in a bungalow in the older part of town, a place he shared with a coworker, sparse, tidy enough. His life felt the same way, controlled but missing something he couldn't name. Just a stack of history books on the shelf hinting at his interests, the one sign that someone with a brain lived here. The light glinting off the peeling paint of the wall, the worn carpet, all muted colors, no joy. This wasn't a home. It was a temporary shelter. He pulled on his work boots, the leather stiff. Out the door by 5:15. The truck rumbled to life, another day beginning. He thought about Chloe, his daughter, 22 now, graduated. He remembered her graduation. A proud moment, a snapshot he carried in his mind. He tried to call her every weekend. Sometimes she answered, sometimes not. Ben, his son, was 20, harder to reach. He hoped he was doing okay. He hoped they knew he cared. The job site was a symphony of controlled chaos. Hammers, saws, shouted instructions. Up on the roof, the sun beat down, unforgiving. Sweat stung his eyes. He thought about the $33,500 hanging over his head. Credit card debt from the lean years after the divorce, a debt owed to the IRS. $32 an hour. It wasn't enough. Never enough. At lunch, he sat alone, chewing on a sandwich, watching the traffic crawl by. He overheard the younger guys talking about their weekend plans, parties, concerts. He closed his eyes for a moment. It felt like a lifetime ago. He remembered his layoff at 30 from the newspaper, the graphic design job he loved. "We're downsizing, Roy." The words still echoed in his head. That was the day the color drained from his world. He got home at 5, showered off the grime, the tar, the dust. The water ran brown, a constant reminder of his day. He ate dinner alone, frozen lasagna. He turned on the TV, a documentary about building cathedrals. He watched the stonemasons, their hands shaping the stone, creating something beautiful, something lasting. He turned it off. The guilt was a knot in his stomach. He looked at his calloused hands. Roofs. He fixed roofs. People needed them, he understood that, but what did he create? What did he leave behind? He thought about that camera, the Minolta. He had to try. He had to see if the artist was still there, buried under years of tar and regret. He remembered his dad, the mechanic, quiet man. Didn't understand Roy's art, but he never told him to stop. Roy wished he could talk to him now. Tell him he understood the feeling of working with his hands, of fixing things, of making something work. But his dad was gone now, just like his marriage, just like his dreams. Or were they? The question hung in the air. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, tired eyes, weary face, but something was different, a flicker of something. Hope, maybe. Roy's alarm blared at 4:30 a.m. every morning, a brutal start. He swung his legs over the side of the bed in the small room he rented, a room in a bungalow. He shared the place with a guy from work, sparse, tidy. A stack of history books, his only personal touch. He splashed water on his face, the cold a momentary jolt. Coffee, always black, no time for anything else. He was out the door by 5:15. The truck was already warming up. 4 guys crammed inside, the same faces. Day in, day out, he barely spoke, just listened to the radio, country music. The same songs every morning. He watched the sky lighten. Another day hauling materials, another day under the sun. The job site was a new warehouse on the edge of town, flat roof, big job. He climbed the ladder, the familiar ache in his shoulders. 17 years of roofing, 17 years of this. His hands were calloused, scarred, permanently rimmed with dirt and tar. He could feel the sun already beating down. It was going to be a scorcher. "Hey, Roy," Danny shouted from across the roof. "You okay today? You look a little off." Roy just nodded. Fine. He wasn't fine, he was numb. He picked up a roll of roofing felt, heavy. He heaved it onto his shoulder. The weight settled, another step, another step. The day stretched ahead, 10 hours of this, just like yesterday, just like tomorrow. Lunch was a cold sandwich he'd packed, sat on the edge of the roof, looked out at the city, smog, traffic, noise. He thought about his daughter, Chloe, 22, graduated college. He was proud of her. He thought about his son, Ben, 20, still figuring things out. He was proud of him too. He pulled out his phone, a text from Chloe. "Hey, Dad, thinking of you," he smiled. A small victory. The afternoon dragged. The sun was relentless. His back ached. His knees ached. Every muscle ached. He kept going. He had to. $32 an hour. $5,546 a month. Not enough. Not even close. $33,500 in debt. Credit cards, IRS. He had to keep going. He had to provide. He had to pay it down. Finally, 4 p.m., time to pack up. He climbed down the ladder, every step a jolt to his spine. He felt every one of his 47 years. The other guys were already heading to their trucks. Roy hung back for a minute. He looked up at the roof. Another one done. Another one checked off the list. Another one soon forgotten. He saw the sun glinting off a piece of discarded flashing, a sharp, unexpected ray. For a moment he saw it as a sliver of hope, a chance to reflect, a chance to create. He knew what he had to do. He would take his camera. He would find the light. He would not let the tar and the dust bury him completely. The artist in him would have one more day. Roy turned to leave, but something caught his eye. He'd been tearing off old shingles all day, a century's worth of roofing stripped bare. Underneath, a layer of aged wood, and tucked into a corner, a small, tarnished tin box. Curiosity overriding his exhaustion, Roy knelt, his knees protesting with a familiar groan. He pried the lid open. Inside, not money, not jewelry, but photographs. Black and white images carefully composed, people from another era caught in moments of everyday life. A woman laughing, a child playing, a couple embracing, all bathed in the soft light of a long-gone afternoon. Roy held one up, his calloused thumb tracing the faded image of a young man, maybe not even 20, full of hope. The shot was perfect. The light, the angle, the story in his eyes. He kept looking. He saw a father holding a son's hand. He saw a couple sharing a kiss in a park. All of them were gone now, but they were here, captured forever. Someone had cared enough to make these. Someone had seen the beauty in the ordinary. And now Roy was the only one left to see them, and he was just tearing roofs off, replacing what time takes away, leaving nothing. A wave of nausea hit him. The sun beat down on his leathery skin, highlighting the spots on his forehead. He was sweating, but it felt like a cold sweat. He saw his own face reflected in a nearby puddle, weathered, tired, empty. He looked at the photo in his hand again. The young man's eyes seemed to mock him, the eyes of a man who still believed in something, the eyes of a man he used to be. He thought of his daughter, Chloe, and his son, Ben. He hadn't shown them anything of himself beyond the roofer. What would they remember? Hard work, debt, silence. He closed his eyes. He knew he had to do something, anything, or he would disappear completely. Later that night, Roy found his old camera in the dusty storage box. A Pentax K1000, solid metal, manual focus. The kind of camera you had to learn to use. He hadn't touched it in 17 years. 17 years since they told him he wasn't needed anymore. 17 years since he decided his art wasn't worth anything. He held it in his hands. The weight felt good, solid, real. He called Chloe. "Hey, kiddo, just wanted to say hi." "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" she asked, her voice bright. Yeah, just thinking about you. And Ben was wondering if you guys are free this weekend." "Maybe," Chloe said. "What did you have in mind?" Roy hesitated. "I was thinking, maybe we could go for a drive, see the city. I was hoping to take some pictures." There was a pause. "Pictures, like with a camera?" "Yeah, I found my old one. Thought I'd dust it off." Chloe laughed. "That's cool, Dad, I guess. Ben's working, but maybe I can swing by for a bit." "Okay, great." Roy hung up. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but he knew he had to start somewhere. Even if it was just a drive with his daughter, even if it was just taking a few pictures, he had to try. Or the photos in that tin box would be the only legacy he ever saw. They would become the only proof he was ever here. Roy sat on the edge of his bed in his rented room, the Pentax K1000 heavy in his calloused hands. The chipped paint on the window sill caught his eye. He saw the light reflecting off it, a shaft of light that would be gone in minutes. He could almost see the shot, but fear clamped down. 17 years. Could he still do it? Or was he just a 47-year-old roofer chasing a ghost? He thought about the photographs in the tin box, the faces staring back at him from a century ago. Someone cared enough to capture them. Someone thought those lives mattered. Had he given up too easily? Had he let that layoff define him? His daughter's graduation flashed in his mind. That was a good day, a proud day, proof he could do something right. The weight of his debt pressed down on him. $33,500. Years of struggle of patching holes, just like the roofs he fixed. But what about the holes in him? He was tired of just existing. Tired of the 4:30 a.m. wake-ups, the backbreaking labor, the endless cycle of work and sleep. Tired of feeling invisible. He missed the feeling of creating, the spark of seeing the world through a different lens. He looked around the sparse room. The stack of history books on the floor, the worn work boots by the door. This wasn't a life, it was a holding pattern. He remembered sketching people in coffee shops, the joy of capturing a fleeting expression. Where did that guy go? The one who dreamed of more than just paying the bills. He was done living like this. Done letting fear dictate his life. Done letting one bad break define him. Roy stood up. He walked over to the small, cracked mirror on the wall. He looked at his reflection, at the lines etched around his hazel eyes, the gray creeping into his dark brown hair. He was no longer the naive 29-year-old who lost his dream job. He was 47. He was a roofer. He was a father. And maybe, just maybe, he was still an artist. It was time to find out. He grabbed his keys and walked out of the room, heading into the night. He knew exactly where he had to go. The old abandoned train depot on the edge of town. He had been admiring it for years, each time he passed it. Tonight, he was going to take its picture. He had been written off for too long. It was time to write his own story. Roy drove his beat-up Ford pickup through the quiet streets, the hum of the engine a familiar comfort. He hadn't driven this late in years. Usually he was asleep by now, preparing for another day on the roof. But tonight was different. Tonight he was chasing something else. The abandoned train depot loomed in the distance, a skeletal silhouette against the night sky. He parked the truck and killed the engine, the silence amplifying the nervous flutter in his chest. He dug through the glove compartment, finding a small, dusty flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness as he approached the depot. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and decay. Graffiti covered the walls, a chaotic tapestry of forgotten stories. This place was a ghost of a busier past. Perfect. Roy remembered when his daughter Chloe, 12 at the time, wanted to try graffiti. He'd been so quick to shut it down, telling her it was vandalism, not art. He regretted that now. Maybe he had been too quick to judge. Maybe he'd been afraid of her expressing a side of herself he had buried. He unlocked the back of his pickup and reached for the heavy metal box. Inside, nestled in foam, was his old .35 Pentax. He hadn't touched it in 17 years. The cool, solid weight in his hands was a shock to his system. It felt good, really good, like holding a piece of himself he thought he had lost forever. He ran his calloused thumb across the lens, wiping away the dust. It had been a gift from his wife, Sarah, back when they were still dreaming together. Back before the layoffs, the bills, the resentment, the divorce. He remembered Sarah saying, "I believe in you, Roy. You've got a gift." Where did that belief go? Why did he give up? He loaded a roll of film, the familiar click, a comforting sound. He raised the camera to his eye, peering through the viewfinder. The world looked different through that lens. The graffiti, the broken windows, the rusted tracks, they weren't just signs of decay. They were stories. Stories of resilience, of survival, of beauty in the forgotten. The low light tested his abilities. He had to remember the settings, adjust the aperture, find the focus. It all started to come back. A faded muscle memory. He snapped a photo of the depot, the flash momentarily illuminating the darkness. It probably wouldn't be a good shot, but that didn't matter. He had taken a picture. He had created something. Roy spent the next few hours wandering around the depot, his camera his constant companion. He found a broken window with a perfect view of the city skyline. He captured the texture of the peeling paint on the walls, the way the moonlight filtered through the cracks in the roof. He wasn't thinking about his debts, about his job, about his regrets. He was just seeing, just creating. He started to breathe normally, without the constant weight on his chest. As dawn approached, painting the sky in hues of orange and gray, Roy packed up his camera. He felt exhausted but invigorated. He wasn't sure if any of the photos would be any good, but that wasn't the point. The point was that he had done it. He had faced his fear and he had created something from nothing. He walked back to his truck, a small smile playing on his lips. As he drove home, he thought about his kids. He should call them. Not just the usual awkward check-in, but to share this with them. Maybe they would understand. Maybe they would see that their old man wasn't just a roofer. Maybe they would see the artist inside. Maybe, just maybe, they could inspire him to reach a dream he had lost somewhere along the way. The weight of the camera felt different now. No longer a dusty relic, but a promise. Roy pulled into his coworker's driveway, the bungalow looking smaller, more worn than usual in the early morning light. $33,500 in debt. Chloe and Ben waiting for him to finally be a real father. He looked at his reflection, 47 years old. Was this just a fleeting fancy, a desperate grasp at a younger self he could never reclaim? He could retreat. He could go back to the roof, the routine, the slow fade. He climbed out of the truck, the determination from the previous night threatening to wane. As Roy walked toward his room, he knew he couldn't. Not this time. He pictured the old photographs, the care and attention, the lives celebrated on film. Damn it, he muttered to himself. He wasn't going to let the world win. Inside his Spartan room, Roy sat on the edge of the bed, the stack of history books looking accusatory on the nightstand. He pulled out a worn notepad and pen. He wrote one word at the top of the page, create. Then, underneath, for me. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The first call was to Chloe. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" Her voice was hesitant, still carrying the echo of past disappointments. Roy took a breath. "Yeah, kiddo, everything's different. I dug out my old camera last night." There was a pause. "The one you used to use," he could almost see her brow furrow. Yeah, went down to the old depot, took some pictures. Another pause. That's cool, Dad. He could feel the skepticism, but also a flicker of something else. Curiosity. I just wanted to tell you. It felt good, Chloe, like something I should be doing. Later, talking to Ben, it was much the same. Ben was more direct. So you're gonna be a photographer now. You know, roofing pays pretty good. Roy didn't get defensive. I'm still gonna roof. Ben gotta pay those bills. The $5,546 a month wasn't going to stretch if he quit, but he also had to be something more than just a walking bill payer. This isn't about quitting my job. It's about not quitting on myself. He added, think I have a good eye, Ben, remember. That night, Roy couldn't sleep. The day ahead was going to be brutal, but his mind was buzzing with images. The depot, the peeling paint, Chloe and Ben. He had a renewed energy for the work ahead. Hauling shingles, sweating under the sun, it was all just work. He looked at the roof now and he imagined the patterns he could make with his camera. As he lay in the darkness, Roy made a promise, to himself, to Chloe and Ben. He would find the beauty in the decay. He would capture the forgotten corners of the city. He would create. He would leave something behind. He was 47 years old, a roofer with bad knees and a mountain of debt. But he was also an artist, and he was just getting started. The 4:30 alarm blared. Roy silenced it with a groan. 17 years of roofing had etched the routine into his bones. The ache in his lower back was a constant companion. He swung his legs off the bed, the cheap mattress offering no resistance. The floor was cold on his bare feet. Outside, the sky was still black. Another day, another roof. He shuffled into the tiny kitchen, the linoleum worn thin, coffee black, no time for anything else. He glanced at the stack of history books on the counter. Another night he hadn't cracked one open. Work was a beast. Now he added photography to the equation. His mind flashed back to Chloe's graduation. His proudest moment. He had to keep pushing for them. By 5:15, Roy was in his beat-up pickup, the engine coughing to life. The drive to the job site was a blur of industrial parks and pre-dawn darkness. The radio coughed out a country song, something about heartbreak and beer. He switched it off. He was more than that now. He was a man with a camera and a purpose. The crew was already there, a knot of silhouettes against the dim light. "Mornin', Roy," Tony, his foreman, grunted. "Got a big one today. Warehouse down on Elm Street." Roy nodded, grabbing his gear. The tools felt heavy but somehow lighter than they had yesterday. The renewed sense of purpose buoyed him. The sun climbed slowly as the work began, hauling bundles of shingles up the ladder, the familiar burn in his muscles, the sweat stinging his eyes. Roy tried to focus on the rhythmic movements, but his mind kept drifting to the images he wanted to capture. The way the light hit the peeling paint on the warehouse next door, the patterns of rust on the corrugated metal. Each movement now inspired him. "Hey, Roy, you okay?" Miguel called down from the roof. "You look like you're daydreaming." Roy shook his head, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about lunch, Miguel." He wasn't lying. He was thinking about the sandwich he'd packed, the one he would eat while scouting locations for his next shoot. The hours crawled by. The sun beat down, reflecting off the black asphalt. The air was thick with the smell of tar and dust. Roy's hands were raw, his back screaming. He wanted to quit, to walk away and never climb another roof again. The pain was a deafening roar. That afternoon, during a water break, Roy saw it. A flash of color against the drab surroundings. A patch of wildflowers growing in a crack in the concrete. He knew it was too far for his camera. He pocketed the image anyway, a mental picture of beauty in the ugliness. He'd get it later. He remembered his father, a man of few words but strong hands. He'd built that porch for his mother. The memory gave Roy the strength to keep going. He could do this. He had to do this. His thoughts drifted to the photographs that the roofer before him had left in the attic of the old house. As the day drew to a close, Roy felt a familiar weariness. But there was something else too, a quiet satisfaction. He had survived, he had endured, and he had found a spark of beauty in the midst of the grind. He felt the mechanical camera in his hands like he did that very night he dug it out. He saw himself in the photograph, a man of toil and perseverance, a roofer and an artist. Later that evening, after a quick shower, Roy drove to the warehouse. The golden hour was upon him, bathing the city in a warm, forgiving light. He raised his camera, framing the shot, the peeling paint, the rust, the wildflowers. He adjusted the aperture, focusing on the details. Then he pressed the shutter. Click. The sound was a tiny act of rebellion, a declaration that he was still here, that he still mattered. He had created something. He took one more and another. When the light was gone, he walked into the darkness. He had kept his promise. Back at his rented room in his coworker's bungalow, Roy felt a surge of adrenaline. He couldn't wait to develop the film. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was 29, before the newspaper layoff, before the slow erosion of his spirit. He thought of Chloe and Ben. They had never known him as an artist, only as a provider. He wanted them to see this side of him, the part he'd buried for so long. Day 12 arrived with the same 4:30 a.m. alarm, the same bleary-eyed routine. But today something was different. There was a lightness in Roy's step, a subtle defiance in his posture. He still hated the roofing work, the backbreaking labor, the constant exposure to the elements. But now he had a reason to endure. The thought of capturing another image, of finding beauty in the mundane, fueled his resolve. The $5,546 a month he earned as a commercial roofer had to be used to fix the maxed-out credit cards and IRS debts. But he would find a way to buy film and developer. Lunch break. The sun beat down on the tar-covered roof. Roy usually spent this time in silence, eating his sandwich, lost in thought. Today, a coworker, Mark, sat beside him. "You seem different, Roy," Mark said, his voice rough. "More alive," Roy shrugged. "Just trying to make the days count, Mark," he replied, economical as always. Mark nodded. "Good for you," he mumbled, turning away. Roy took another bite of his sandwich, a small smile playing on his lips. He had noticed the way Mark never looked him in the eye. Roy knew he could never understand what was going on with him. Day 16. The photographs were back. The image of the warehouse was better than he even imagined. The rust orange really popped in the picture. He held the print up to the sunlight, examining every detail. The composition, the light, the texture. It was good, really good. It was like the 17 years of rust fell off him. He felt like he was 30 again. He remembered working at the newspaper, designing ads, but also having the freedom to work on his own stories. That night, Roy decided to show the photos to his daughter, Chloe. He felt nervous, unsure of what she would think. She was 22, a college graduate with a sharp mind and an even sharper wit. He drove to her apartment, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hey, Dad," she said, opening the door. She was surprised to see him. "What's up?" Roy held out the photographs. "I wanted to show you something," he said, his voice a little shaky. Chloe took the prints, her eyes widening as she examined them. She ran her finger over the rough texture of the paper. "These are amazing, Dad," she said, her voice full of genuine surprise. "I had no idea you were so good." Roy beamed, a warmth spreading through his chest. Day 21. The ache in his lower back was still there, a constant reminder of the physical toll of his job, but it didn't matter as much anymore. He had a purpose, a reason to keep going. That evening, Roy took Ben to the warehouse. He had printed an enlarged version of the wildflower photograph. He held it up for Ben to see. "This is it, kid. This is what I do." Ben looked from his father to the photograph, his eyes filled with respect. "It's really great, Dad. I can see it." Roy had hoped for the support but never knew if he would get it. Ben saw him. Roy knew he was still a commercial roofer. He still had $33,500 to pay off. He still rented that spare room. But he was also an artist, and that made all the difference. Day 30. 1 month in. Roy woke at 4:30 a.m. as usual. The difference now was the anticipation thrumming beneath the exhaustion. He wasn't just heading to another day of tar and gravel. He was heading towards another day of capturing light. As he ate his plain oatmeal, he reviewed the shots from the weekend, spread out on the small table in his rented room. He was learning the camera again, feeling the settings become second nature. Each click of the shutter felt like a small act of defiance against the grayness that had threatened to consume him. At the job site, even his crew noticed a shift. "You seem different, Roy," said Miguel as they prepped the materials. "More, I don't know, alive." Roy just shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. He didn't need to explain. They wouldn't understand the rediscovery, the feeling of purpose flooding back after so many silent years. He just worked harder, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, his eye constantly scanning the surroundings. Even the way the sunlight hit the neighboring buildings seemed different now, full of potential. Later that week, Chloe called. "Hey, Dad," she said. "I was thinking about those photos. Have you thought about showing them somewhere, like a coffee shop or something?" Roy felt a surge of panic. The thought of putting his work on display for strangers terrified him, but he also felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone else would see what he saw. "I don't know, Chloe," he said, his voice hesitant. "I'm not sure they're good enough." Chloe laughed. "Dad, they're amazing. You should at least try." His son Ben also brought up the photography during their weekly call. "So, Dad, you're really getting into this photography thing, huh?" Roy chuckled. "Yeah, I guess I am." "That's cool," Ben said. "I always knew you were creative. Remember that time you built that treehouse for me and Chloe? It was like something out of a movie." Roy smiled, remembering the hours he had spent carefully crafting that treehouse, pouring his heart and soul into every detail. It was one of his proudest moments, a testament to his ability to create something lasting. The weight of the $33,500 debt still pressed down on him, a constant reminder of his financial struggles. He knew that photography wouldn't magically solve his problems, but it gave him something to focus on, a way to channel his energy and creativity. It was a way to prove to himself that he wasn't just a commercial roofer, that he was still capable of creating something beautiful, something meaningful. That night, Roy decided to take a walk through the industrial district on the edge of town. The area was filled with decaying factories and abandoned warehouses, relics of a bygone era. He saw beauty in the decay, a haunting reminder of the passage of time. He raised his camera, framing a shot of a crumbling brick wall, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the weathered surface. He clicked the shutter, capturing a moment of beauty in the midst of decay. He realized he wasn't just taking pictures. He was documenting his own personal renaissance, one frame at a time. He was building a legacy, not of tar and gravel, but of light and shadow. He was showing the world and himself that it's never too late to begin again. Roy's new routine settled in like the dust on his work boots, a constant companion. 4:30 a.m. alarm. Black coffee. Bag lunch packed. The only difference now was the small camera bag nestled beside his lunchbox. He felt a flicker of excitement each morning, a stark contrast to the soul-numbing dread that had been his morning ritual for years. Weekends became sacred. He'd scout locations Friday nights, poring over maps of forgotten industrial zones, whispering names of streets to himself like incantations. He was drawn to the textures, the peeling paint, the rusted metal skeletons of abandoned factories. He saw beauty in the decay, a metaphor for his own life perhaps. He'd wake before dawn on Saturday, pack a thermos of coffee, and lose himself in the city. He found himself remembering forgotten lessons from art school, the rule of thirds, leading lines, the power of negative space. He saw his old artistic eye returning, like a muscle slowly waking after years of sleep. One Saturday, he found himself photographing a broken stained glass window in an abandoned church. The morning light streamed through the shattered pieces, casting fragmented rainbows across the dusty floor. He spent hours capturing different angles, different light, until he felt he had caught the essence of its beauty and decay. The camera wasn't just a hobby, it was a shield against the crushing weight of his life. The $33,500 debt loomed, but each click of the shutter was a small act of defiance. He was creating something, not just tearing down. He even started bringing the camera to work, capturing the harsh beauty of the city skyline from the roofs he worked on, finding angles no one else saw. "What you doing there, Roy?" his coworker Dave asked one afternoon. Roy, squinting into the viewfinder, simply replied, Just trying to see things a little different, Dave. That's all. He started making small talk with Chloe and Ben on their weekend calls, not about his work but about his photography. I saw this old factory downtown, Chloe. You wouldn't believe the light inside. He could almost hear the skepticism in her voice, but then she asked, "Can you send me a picture, Dad?" A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. He knew he couldn't expect them to fully understand, not yet. He was 47, a commercial roofer with 17 years under his belt and $33,500 in debt. But he was also an artist again, slowly rebuilding himself, one photograph at a time. Word was getting around about Roy's hobby. At first the crew ribbed him. "Hey, Ansel Adams up on the Ramirez job," but the teasing had an edge of respect. Roy, 47, with 17 years of roofing under his belt, wasn't one to back down from hard work. And they saw something new in his eyes, a spark that had been missing. He wasn't just going through the motions anymore. The photos started to change things at work. Roy's eye for detail, always there but dormant, started to influence his roofing work. He suggested a slight change in the angle of the flashing on a historical renovation. "It'll catch the light better," he mumbled, more to himself than to the foreman, Miguel. Miguel, a man who valued efficiency above all else, actually listened. And when the job was done, the building owner specifically praised the flashing. Miguel, surprised, clapped Roy on the shoulder. "Good eye, Roy, that detail. It made all the difference." That night, Roy received a call from the owner. "Roy, this is Mr. Abernathy. I'd like you to lead the next historical renovation team. Your attention to detail and, frankly, your appreciation for the past is invaluable." His income was still $5,546 a month, but the promotion came with a raise. A small one, but enough to put an extra few hundred towards the $33,500 debt. He started packing lunches instead of buying fast food every day, little things that added up. Even Dave, the coworker he rented the room from in the bungalow, noticed the change. "You seem lighter, Roy, like you ain't carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Roy just shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "Just talking pictures, Dave, that's all." The weekend calls with Chloe and Ben weren't as awkward anymore. Chloe even started asking about the camera, the lenses, the film. "What kind of film do you use, Dad?" she asked. Ben, who was studying history at community college, showed a photo he found of a historical building downtown and said, "Dad, you should get down there." Roy sent them photos regularly now, pictures of rusty fire escapes, shadows on brick walls, portraits of the men he worked with. They were seeing him differently. Not just as their divorced dad, the roofer, but as someone with a purpose, a vision. One day, Chloe called, "Dad, I showed some of your photos to a friend who works at that coffee shop downtown, the Daily Grind. They're looking for local artists to display. I showed her your work and she wants to meet you." Roy felt a jolt of fear and excitement, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was laid off from his dream job as a graphic designer. He almost said no, almost let the fear win. But then he remembered the tin box of photographs he found on that roof and he said, "Okay, Chloe, set up the meeting." He pulled out the best of his photos and set to work cleaning them and framing them. He wasn't sure how to prepare or if he should even bother. As he looked at his work, he started to have flashbacks from his younger self, with the sketchbooks and dreams. The old familiar dreams that he never thought he would have again. The meeting was set for Tuesday at 6:00 p.m. He picked his suit out of his wardrobe and put on his best pair of shoes. He arrived